Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forgiven. In today's episode, we don't have Pastor Mike again. The silly goose is still on vacation. No, just kidding. He really deserves it. Him and Angela work very hard, so I'm glad that they're having a good time. Wish them best of luck, all that good stuff. So I have my resident co-host. He's always the backup plan, but not in the bad way.
I'm the backup plan once again.
There's nothing bad about being a good backup, okay? And we're gonna save this for.
I'm the closer.
I'm gonna save this for a podcast topic, but being a good follower is just as important as being a good leader. Just like how nobody talks about in football, how being a second stringer, especially like a backup quarterback, is probably the most challenging position you could ever actually do, because you're going in when your team is at their lowest, and you have to somehow rally them together. So don't feel bad.
I wasn't feeling bad at all.
No, I know, but anyway, today's episode we're going to be asking and answering the question of what happened to forgiveness. Somehow in today's world we have lost the ability to forgive people. And I think it goes a little deeper than that. It's not just forgiving people, but we've lost the ability to allow people to be redeemed. We've lost the ability to show people mercy, compassion, grace, all of these things. And as Christians, we're called to do that. We are called to forgive people. And we're called to allow them to redeem themselves, just like Christ redeemed us. And that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about what happened to forgiveness. So I think also I didn't even say your name. This is Bryce. You guys know this by now.
Hey, I'm Bryce.
Bryce, what do you have to say about this? Just an intro of what happened to forgiveness. What are your thoughts on today's world and forgiveness?
I think we're just in an ever-changing culture right now that we don't really value different opinions anymore. And from what happens is you have a different opinion than someone, and then because of that, we're so wrapped up our identity in our opinions that it becomes like an attack when you have an opposing one. And so therefore, when you don't agree with what I agree with, then now you're attacking me directly, and then now I don't want to forgive you because you hurt me. And so it's that's what I've kind of observed in our culture, in this upcoming culture, in our generation and the generation coming up. I think that's where it starts to stem, is that we haven't really had to extend forgiveness, because now we just get to play the guilt card, I'm the victim. The victim card. There we go. That's what I'm looking at. Instead of actually dealing with an issue and be like, hey, you know what? That person hurt me, but it actually wasn't maybe as big of a deal. Or maybe actually they have something valid in what they said.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that's where I'm going to start off.
Well, and I think you're right. And we did an episode on cancel culture specifically. You were on that one, actually.
Was I on that one?
No, I
was at camp that week.
Yeah, that was Micah. That was his last podcast that he did with us. And so some of the things we talk about here will be related to that episode. So I highly suggest you go and listen to the cancel culture episode as well as this one, because we are going to be talking about cancel culture in this episode.
Definitely.
Because I think that is one of the avenues in which has really poisoned today's view on forgiveness. The idea of forgiveness is that you wronged me, so you punched me in the face.
Yeah, I did. Sorry about that.
Yeah, right? Sorry about that. Now, the onus is on me to forgive you, right? And so I can say, Bryce, you know what? You had a bad day, whatever. I forgive you. Mistakes happen, whatever. That is forgiveness. I have taken that wrong. I have dealt with it. I no longer hold resentment or anything towards you, and I have let it go. And now you have the act to redeem yourself. You can say, hey, you know what? I am sorry. It won't happen again. And that is forgiveness. But so often in our world, we only one side puts in the effort.
Yeah.
So many times I'll say, I'm sorry, or say, I forgive you, but it's unauthentic. It doesn't mean what it means.
Yeah.
And we don't allow the other side, you, to reciprocate and to actually allow themselves to become redeemed.
Yeah, I think that actually that's a really good point. The second step is the most part. So many of us be like, oh, I forgive you. Like we would go through that moment. I'm like, hey man, I punch you in the face. Sorry, man. I shouldn't have really done it. I got upset. Can you forgive me? And you're like, yeah, you're forgiven. But then you hold on to that.
Exactly.
Or it's like, hey, actually, maybe Bryce has an anger issue. maybe there's actually more to it. And you realize that it's like, and then this is like a simple term that we're going with. Yeah. It's like, hey, this person has a problem, an issue. And so rather than like addressing, we're like, oh, I forgive you. But then we never take the next step to actually walk them through their issue.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, I've got an anger problem. It wasn't just that I just punched him in the face and it was a one-time thing. It's like, I've punched multiple people in the faces. Not literally, let's not.
But I know what you mean. Yeah.
But then we don't take them and walk them through the next steps. It's like, hey, actually, I realize you might do this. So now I'm going to I'm not going to maybe trust you that close anymore. I'm going to create a few little boundaries.
Exactly.
But I'm going to help walk you through this anger. Be like, hey, you know what? Even as Christians, what does the word say about anger? We're using that as an example. And then we take the next step because then it becomes forgiven to, changed, redeemed. I don't know. I think I've had a few examples of those in my life where someone's on both sides where they've been told I'm forgiven, but they actually just continue to allow me to walk in this place versus moving forward.
Yeah. And the other thing about like forgiveness is actually being able to forget what the person did.
Forgive and forget.
Exactly. So we see this all the time in like movies or in like marriages, right? And I am single, so married people listening, take this with a grain of salt. This is just an observation, okay? So many times, and growing up, I seen this with my married family. It would be, we keep a scorecard. You say you forgive them, but the next time the fight rolls around, you pull out your Rolodex of everything bad that they did, and then you throw it back in their face, and you keep a scorecard.
Yeah.
And that's not true forgiveness. That's just pushing past the problem, right? Like true forgiveness is actually letting go of that and saying like, no, it's over, it's done with, and you forget. Just like God doesn't keep a list of our sins. We're clean, we're white, we're washed, we're done. We are redeemed, our sins are paid for. That's it. And that's what we need to be doing. And that's a lot. It's way easier said than it is done, obviously. Yeah. And so you're right. We do need to help. We're bad on both sides of this.
Yeah.
We're really bad at forgetting because we throw it back in their face. But then we're also really bad that maybe when you do forget and you are willing to forgive and move on, we stop there. We don't push them forward to the next one and actually try to help them. We don't actually show them compassion and mercy in that way.
So when you say like the compassion and mercy, like give me an example of what that would look like.
So
it's like I think that's like really cute, like cute. That's really cute. That's like a big point to where like actually forgiveness happens. And so what do you mean by that?
So I grew up without a dad, single family home, just my mom. I have forgiven my dad, or at least I am working on forgiving him. And part of that forgiveness is actually forgetting the mistakes that he made. And then that doesn't mean, and you talked about boundaries, that doesn't mean that I completely allow him back in and pretend that it never happened. It just means that I stop using his bad choices against him to make him feel bad. And when I mean showing him mercy and compassion, it means that I probably know that he's going to do it again because he needs help, right? So my dad struggles with alcoholism. Okay. So I understand that part of that forgiveness is, and it sucks for us because all the onus gets put on us, especially as Christians, but that's part of like taking the high road, right? That's part of being a Christian is understanding that like we need to help, like showing forgiveness is so much more than just letting it go. It's actually giving them a chance to redeem themselves. And so that brings me to some of the definitions. We've thrown around a lot of these words, but we didn't actually like define them. And wait, does that actually answer your question of like the idea of like, that's what I mean about forgiveness and helping them move past it is like, my dad is still going to make mistakes. And I haven't even actually had the full chance to reconcile with him yet. But I know that when I do see him next, I'm going to be able to tell him like, hey, like I forgive you and it's okay. And it's like, I love you and I want to try to help you. And that's what I mean.
not lording it over them.
Exactly.
I think that's what out of all that, it was like part that stood out to me was like not. It's like I have these feelings, I have these emotions. It's like, but I've chosen to forgive you because I have been forgiven.
Exactly.
And then it's like I'm not then just going to be able to. Actually, true forgiveness is like actually letting it go, and not being like lording it over that person's head constant. Be like, you did this, and so I'm not surprised you did it again. And then it's like, see, you did it again. Oh, look, but you're actually like, you know what? You may, like you said, you may do it again. I think. But then you choose to continue to forgive.
Exactly.
Where you're like, hey, I'm going to be here with you. And you just eventually set boundaries. But like, I think that's huge where it's like actually genuinely letting it go.
Yep. Yeah. And so I'm glad that helped. So definitions, I kind of skipped over my notes. No. So redemption.
Get into the juicy stuff right away.
Yeah. So redemption is an act of redeeming or atoning for a fault/mistake or the state of being redeemed. And so redemption has a theological definition, and then it kind of has a normal cultural definition, and I kind of took them both and put them together. So the idea of redemption is it's a verb, right? Redemption is an action. It's something you take to someone to redeem them of their mistakes. So Christ's redeeming action for us was his death and resurrection on the cross by taking our sin. That is redemption. We are redeemed because of that. Or in like when I was little and you get punished by your mom, and then at the end of it you would say, oh, you're sorry, and did you learn your lesson? That punishment, so to speak, is the act of being redeemed. It's learning your lesson. It's atoning for your mistake. Or in modern terms, people earn their redemption by going to prison. You are paying your debt to society. That's redemption. It's taking an action and using it to show people that you are willing to change, that you have atoned for your mistakes, that you are paying the transaction. You're finishing the transaction. That's what redemption is. Does that make sense? Because that's how I've always understood it, and that's the definition that I found. And it is hard to wrap my head around sometimes.
I think the prison analogy is the one that kind of confuses me. Is like, but that's just a punishment for the a responsibility. Yeah. So not everybody's being redeemed in that process.
True.
They're just going and doing their time. I think the true redemption happens after.
Fair.
After they're released, right? So it's like they have paid that time, they've done their debt, their dues, and then when they're released, that's the redemption story, right? It's like that's where you truly find is like, are you being redeemed? You have a chance to redeem yourself, and are you going to? And so, like, while they're in prison, that's actually just a consequence to their mistake, which we all have to own up to.
Yep. So I guess I said step one in the redemption process.
There we go. Okay. We got a 10-step process.
Yeah, absolutely.
What that 10-step process is, I don't know yet.
And and that's a question for later for sure. But forgiveness, again, is to cease the feel of resentment against the offender, or the process of forgiving or being forgiven. So it comes back to our punching in the face analogy, right? You offended me by punching me in the face. Now it's on me now to cease that feeling of resentment, anger, all these things, and allow you to be the chance to forgive. So that's forgiveness, right? Like that. I feel like most of us have a good understanding of what forgiveness is.
Yeah.
And then I have mercy. And this is where this wraps back into when I was talking about the relationship with my dad. And I think mercy is something we just don't actually talk about a lot in the church, right? Mercy is compassion and forgiveness shown towards someone who it is within one's power to punish them or to harm them. So what that's saying is if Bryce punches me in the face, I have every right to not forgive him because he has hurt me. He has offended me. But it's mercy that allows me, that if I show him mercy, that's like the first step is you show them mercy, then they can forgive, then they can be redeemed. Mm-hmm. Right? And all of these things, they come together, but all of these three things is kind of what this podcast is going to be talking about, because we don't talk about them enough. We forgive people, but we don't show them mercy, or we somehow redeem people without showing them mercy, but then we forgive them. And these things come together. It's a trifecta of how we actually work on the process of forgiveness and redemption. And so when it comes down to the relationship with my dad, I have to show him mercy. Right? He has made all these mistakes. He wasn't in my life. I had a ton of resentment towards him. But now it's my job as a believer and as his son to show him mercy. Because I have every right to disown him, to be mad at him. Even the law and the Bible would say so.
Yeah.
But I have a due diligence to show him mercy, because who else will?
Yeah.
So, what do you think of those? Because
no, I really like the way that you're tying like three. I think you're right. Like, it starts with that place of mercy, right? I have, and it comes to, I have the opportunity to like continue to, and then the thing is with mercy is like I could continue to cause harm to you by not, right? And so it's like I choose to show you mercy. And then from that mercy, I show you forgiveness. And then it's like that. I said 10-step, but actually when we go through, it's really a 3-step process. Yep. And then it goes from mercy, forgiveness into redemption, right? Because, and it's the same. I have a method for becoming a believer, and it's kind of similar, where it's like, I'm going to show you mercy first. I'm going to overlook, and I'm going to look past that, because I could respond. I think of like the mercy, like you ever play that game where you
absolutely
lock hands and someone's stronger than the other, and they have every opportunity to actually they could break your hand, break your fingers, but the person cries out for mercy, mercy, and you can have every opportunity to continue to put pain on that person. But when they cry out for mercy, you let go and you forget, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, all right, then it's done. And so that's where the place of forgiveness comes. If you really hurt that, then the place of forgiveness comes. And as we walk through forgiveness with that person, then the redemption starts to begin in that person's life, where, hey, now that we're on step 3, we get to walk you through a beautiful thing of redemption. So I like the way that I don't even know if that was intentional.
No, it was.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, of course it was. Even if it wasn't, no.
And I like that mercy analogy. I think that really like sticks with people. At least it did for me, because I have every right to keep pushing and being angry. But at some point we do have to let go, because it hurts them, but it also hurts you.
Yeah.
Like bitterness and anger and resentment, man, they eat you alive.
Yeah, really.
Like, holy man. Like, I keep talking about my dad because, I don't know, he's just been on my mind lately. But for the longest time, when I was like 12, 13, 14, I was full of bitterness, resentment, anger, right? Like, I just seen all my friends going to weekend games with their dads and going golfing and doing all these things, and I was just bitter, so mad. And I was like, how come I can't get that? Like, I was like, where's that from me? And I was so resentful. And it's taken me 10 plus years now to work out that resentment. And truthfully, we're humans. Guess what? It's going to come back. and that's the other thing of like, we talk about that a lot, actually. I found in the church that we talk about like, oh, forgiveness is a process, and, it's okay if you don't, forgive somebody right on the spot. And I agree. I think it is.
Yeah.
But you do have to forgive them at some point.
Yeah.
And it's really a personal thing as to when you're going to forgive them.
I think the thing that keeps on coming to mind when we're talking about this forgiveness, I think it's a two-way street. Like, even we kind of touched on it, was like, we have to learn to forgive others. I think this actually, like, both people need to go through this story.
Absolutely.
And both have the choice to choose to go through these steps. Because I think, even with your dad, as you're talking about that, it sounds like it's like, you know what, you're realizing I need to extend mercy to him. Mm-hmm. And then you're going through that forgiveness process. It's like, I need to forgive him. And so like, and then it's the redemption. And so then it's like, it's a two-way street. The redemption is the most difficult part. But I don't know. I just find it interesting because I think both, like you and your dad he would have to also
absolutely
extend it to himself. And like, I think there's a two-way street. Like, we have to have mercy with ourselves. Mm-hmm. Because like, even for your dad's case, like sometimes we need to, like, I need to have mercy with myself. I keep on putting pain on myself. And then I need to extend that to ourselves, because then realize that I'm forgiven. and then the redemption allows
Yep.
to come. And so I don't know. I'm maybe I don't know if that's going to go anywhere or not, but I think it's a two-way street.
Though.
Like
absolutely, it is a two-way street, and it's really hard to talk about being the person that it's really hard to talk about being the person that needs to receive the forgiveness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's it's really, really difficult. But you're right. It is a two-way street. And then I guess the question becomes, what do you do when you are fully what do I do now? Because I am fully ready to extend this to my dad. But what if it never happens? Right? And I'll just be real with the audience. It probably never will. Truthfully, I don't know if I ever will get the opportunity to really sit down and have this conversation with him. And I've come to terms with that. And so when you bring in the two-way street conversation, man, does it change it? Because it's like now we have to ask the question of what happens when you can't forgive somebody in terms of circumstances.
Yeah.
Right? What if they never get to hear that you're sorry or that you forgive them?
Yeah.
I just think of all the people that have died before they got to understand that people have forgiven them, man, it's crazy.
I think that's why even Jesus makes it so important to us, in scripture, where it's you have been forgiven of much, so you're also to forgive others.
Yeah. Of
that, right? So it's you have on the notes here for, I figure the great leeway into it.
It was a perfect transition.
Where is it? The unmerciful servant.
Yeah.
Where the servant was in so much in debt. And then he goes to his master comes and forgives him of this crazy amount of money. Yeah. And then he goes after that and he has his own servants. And he reigns it over them. He demands money from them. And they pay it immediately. And so then what does the master do? Continue the story there, Logan.
Well, then the master's hey, I forgave you your huge debt. And then the master's well, he's stuck in this quandary now because he was forgiven, but he's not showing that forgiveness to others.
Yeah. And that's what I think we do. And that's why I think Jesus emphasizes this story and talks about forgiveness, because when he died on the cross for us and rose again, we were forgiven of everything. Mm-hmm. And he chose that. And because we have forgiven something that's unsurmountable in forgiveness, we're not worthy of the forgiveness that we've received, but yet we freely receive it still. Yep. And if we freely receive this, just like that servant that master didn't need to, and actually he probably went in debt because of it.
Oh, absolutely.
But he chose, this person's suffering. I'm going to help them out, and showed forgiveness. But then if we don't return that to our fellow believers, right? If we hold on to that anger, that frustration, and we are just so mad at that person, which are valid feelings, you need to go through those emotions, but we need to then forgive. Yep. Because we were first forgiven of so much by Christ. Yep. And now we're to extend the same thing to others. And so, but it's easy said than done. And I've got people that I still need to do that in my prayer. As I'm talking, I'm thinking of people. I'm man, I need to go and do that myself. That I still lord it over them, and I haven't chosen to forgive them. Yeah. But then it's going to say, as you have not forgiven them, well, he will also hold you by the same standards.
Yes.
And so it's a scary passage, but also it's a cool passage to realize oh man, I'm forgiven, but also it's because I'm forgiven, I now need to forgive.
Yes. Well, it's the same idea of blessed to be a blessing, right? That was the whole thing with the Torah and the Pentateuch. The Israelites were blessed to go out and to be blessings to others, and they kind of sucked at it, but right, it's the same idea of we have been bestowed this gift, this incredible gift that we do not deserve. And truthfully, God doesn't even actually ask anything directly in return, but he does kind of be you should go and forgive others now.
It's the fine print.
Yeah, it's kind of the fine print almost. And so it's incredible to me that we just don't do it. And again, we're human. It is so hard for us to actually forgive somebody, especially those big, huge wrongs that people have done. Let's be real. We live in a broken world. People make ginormous mistakes. It happens.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, we have all made big mistakes that we all thought were unforgivable. Right? But still still we are forgiven. You know? And so I don't know, I think it's so hard for new believers to understand that, even non-believers too. So like really reconcile with the idea that like, well, why do I need to forgive the murderer and the rapist and all these things? Well, it's like, you know, we talked about this when we had Peter on, but it's the idea that like all sin is equal. So it doesn't we may put a cultural value on somebody's mistake and their sin, and we may choose to forgive them if somebody steals bread for their family, but we won't forgive them, you know, when somebody murders somebody. And it's like, well, we can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
You know, if we are forgiven, then we are to forgive others.
Yeah. I think like the world teaches us like that. It's like you, and we kind of touched on it already. Like you have every right to stay mad at this person.
Yep.
You have every right to resent this person. You have every right to be selfish in this moment. Like that's kind of what the world is teaching, is like, hold on to that. Like that's okay. Use it as fuel to make yourself better. It becomes as selfish about me. But Jesus says the opposite. We're to release that and lay it before his throne room. We're to cast our own crowns before him, because it's not about us. It's and don't hear what I'm saying. Your feelings and these emotions are very valid, but we need to learn to lay that before him, because that's what the kingdom of God does. That's what we as believers need to look at. Take the time to process it, but then we need to learn to actually lay that down before God and let him deal with it.
Yes.
Because we are not the people that are actually going to be doing
like the forgiving. Like we're like it's
we're not the ones that need to go. We feel like we need to take it in our own hands and be like, I'm the one who's going to inflict pain now. I'm trying to think of the word.
We're not the judge. We're not the jury.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of right. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
I was like, there's a passages like in Psalms when I was a new believer that I was reading, and because I was bullied as a kid and I got made fun of it. I held on to so much. I had a victim mentality.
Me too, brother.
Yeah, I had such a victim mentality because of it though. And I would hold it over so many people, so many people's lives. And eventually I remember reading in Psalms that when David was writing, it was like that we are actually to lay it into the hands of God. And it's like, what is mere man? It is actually Psalm 56. What can mere man do to me?
Yes.
Right. We're actually and it talks about like, we're to actually trust God. And actually, honestly, the best way to trust God is to choose to forgive and give it in God's hands. Yep. Let him be the judge. You may know something about someone that nobody else will. And you could point that out and be like, this person's this, they're a jerk, they're mean, they're all these things. Or you can let the Lord reveal it. He knows all things. And eventually the truth comes out.
Yep.
And so instead of being angry with and frustrated with that person, now there might be a conversation you need to have.
Absolutely.
But lay it before the Lord. Bring it to him and allow him to bring that justice. Yep. Right? He is the righteous judge. He is the perfect judge. And I think when we start to understand that, when we choose to forgive and lay that down before God, real freedom happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the challenge then becomes too, our culture tells us that we should fight back.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Like our culture tells us that, oh, somebody wronged you, then you have every right to wrong them back. And notice what I said there. You have the right to wrong them back. So if somebody steals your car, then society would tell us, culture would tell us, then that it's okay, you can go beat them up. Or it's okay, like you can dish out your own brand of justice type thing. Right? Like culture tells us that that's okay. You're right? Like, oh, this person is like, I'll just be real. I'll get to the point of what I'm saying, because I feel like I just need to get it out there. Right? If somebody dies and for some reason the whole world thinks that it's okay to go around and completely destroy and burn down cities. How is that, and how is that justice for somebody that died?
Yeah.
How does burning down somebody's local business,
pain for pain?
Exactly. How is it that you can like you suffer this terrible pain, and I truly am sorry for anybody that dies. It is a terrible, terrible thing. But that doesn't give us the right to go out and to riot and to burn cities down and to hurt people. Pain doesn't cause more pain. Two wrongs don't make a right, just like two rights don't make a wrong.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what way we look at it. That's not forgiveness. That's not mercy. That's not even grieving. Like if you've lost somebody close to you and you go out and you get angry and you start throwing things and getting mad, you're not actually grieving. You're just pushing that emotion aside and you're letting your anger come out. You're not actually processing it. And so for me, I get so mad at our culture today because we think that it's okay to do that. Right? And like don't get me wrong, there is a place for a peaceful protest and to go out and make your voice heard.
Yeah.
That is 100% within your right as a Christian, as an American, even as a Canadian. You have the right to do that. Go and do that. Go and express your voice. But that doesn't give you the right as a Christian and as a human being to go and destroy things, to go and do these things, because that's not forgiveness. That's not mercy. That's not even healthy for you as a person. You're actually just feeding that fire. And our culture tells us that that's okay. And it really upsets me. It really hurts me to my core that people today think that because of one wrongdoing, it gives them the right to go out and to do these things. And Christians too. And it really hurts me. And Romans 12:17, it says, repay no evil for evil, but give through to do what is honorable in sight of all. Repay no evil with evil.
Evil with evil? Is that what you're saying?
Repay no evil.
Oh, no evil with evil.
No, repay no evil with evil. But give thought to do what is honorable in sight of all. I just repeated that a bunch of times because it's one of my favorite verses. And it supports completely what I was saying. We are not to repay evil with evil.
Yeah.
And that's when mercy comes in. That's God's kind of smart, right? It's almost like he knows all of these things and had a plan for all of these things.
Yeah.
Right? We're humans. It's a big challenge for us. When I was a kid, somebody stole my bike. The first thing I wanted to do was go and punch the kid and get my bike back. Now, I have every right to get my bike back, absolutely, but I don't have the right to go and assault the kid.
Yep.
That's wrong. That's not showing mercy. That's not showing compassion. That's not even allowing them redemption, those three things that we talked about at the beginning. And so I don't know how to reconcile with our culture today this idea that we can repay evil with more evil. Because that's not how you forgive somebody. That's not how you show mercy. That's not how you allow for redemption. It just adds fuel to the fire.
I definitely agree. It definitely does add fuel to the fire. And I think that's how I was personally driven for the longest time. I had to prove people wrong. You hurt me, so I'm gonna hurt you. I'm gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do that. I still have friends in my life that's their mentality, and I actually know Christians, like you said, that is exactly what they do. In the place of hurting, they want to hurt others. And I think honestly, as much as it sucks, I think it's human nature. I think it's part of like how we're not. I don't want to say wired, but I think a lot of us, that's how we are.
Well, we live
when
in
we
a
get
broken
hurt,
world.
Our emotions flare up, and we don't know how to respond. And when we don't have Jesus in our life, when we don't have that forgiveness that we've received, and we know that place of hope, well, the only thing we know is these emotions we're feeling, and it's anger, it's frustration. And then we go out and we respond by saying, I am going to hurt you. But then there's true freedom when we choose to forgive that other person. When we respond out of a place of love and not of frustration. But to get to that place is so difficult.
Yep.
And that's where even like as you're getting fired up, and like I'm just gonna say even to the listeners, it's like you might be fired up about some things too, and you might be like, these people, they bah. But it's even as we're talking about this, it's reminding ourselves, it's like we still need to respond in a place of love.
Yes,
we need to still respond in a place where like, you know what, you're doing these things, but we need to be the change.
Yeah,
we're the believers in this situation. We're held to a different standard. And if we truly believe we're forgiven, then we need to respond and be like, man, let's be the example of what it looks like. Let's raise a generation that chooses forgiveness over a place of anger.
Yes.
Over a place of retaliation.
Yeah, that's the word, the retaliation. Yeah, exactly.
Because we want to retaliate. We want to respond. When someone hurts someone that we love, we want to defend them. Right? We even see this. Look at Peter.
I was just going to bring up Peter.
Yeah, when Jesus gets taken, right? They're taking him, and it needs to be done so that we can actually receive this forgiveness. Yep. But Peter's response was he grabbed a sword
chopped a guy's
ears off. Right? We praised Peter, but I think we forget about the little things like that.
Yep.
Where it's like, man, but then Jesus responds by healing this guy's ear. And then he still goes and dies on a cross. Could you imagine being that guard? But do you think that guard realized something there? We're like, oh man. And Peter also?
Oh, absolutely.
But our first instinct is when someone that we love is hurt or that we are hurt, is to respond in frustration, violence, whatever that is, anger. And Jesus, Peter's sadly, and again, Peter gets the bad pour into the stick sometimes.
Absolutely, he does.
But this is an example of then Jesus still chooses to forgive Peter. He still chooses to use Peter as one of the stones to help build the church, to build upon. Right, you're going to go and feed my sheep. Right, another redemption story.
Absolutely,
right there. He rebukes. He denies Jesus 3 times after that. He just went from, huzzah, I'm going to go chop your ear off, to, I don't even know this man. I don't even know who Jesus is. To then Jesus coming back to him after the resurrection and forgiving him and saying, Peter, do you love me?
Yep.
Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Then feed my sheep.
It's such a
that's the forgiveness story. That's the redemption. And what has Peter done? Because he was shown that forgiveness, he was shown that mercy, he was shown the forgiveness, and he was given the opportunity for redemption.
Yep.
And then Peter helps build the church to what it is even today.
On this rock, I'll build my church. Peter is Petra. Means rock. It's almost like I preached on this a month ago. No, but. And that leads perfectly into what I wanted to kind of talk about. Is I wanted to look at our culture, and I wanted to look at some good examples of how we've actually allowed this redemption to happen. But I also want to look at the bad ones too, because I think it helps us learn how we can better do the next one. You know what I mean? And so I didn't put Peter down. It came across my mind. Or I didn't put Saul down as well, because that's also a great story of redemption. I mean, the whole Bible, truthfully, is actually a story of redemption when you look at it, in terms of it's the Israelites constantly being redeemed.
And the leaders. The leaders that God chooses are people that made so many mistakes.
So many.
God just redeems them all.
Yes, absolutely. But so one of the ones that, and we talked about it on the cancel culture episode, so I don't want to get too into the specifics of it. But we see and this is specifically for the Christians listening, and this probably the older ones too. And when I mean older, the more mature. How come we allow these big mega church pastors we hold one mistake against them? Right? We have somebody like Carl Lentz, who was the pastor of Hillsong New York, kind of the head of every Hillsong North America division, you might say. And yeah, he makes a mistake, and a pretty big one. He had some infidelity in his marriage, right? But he's reconciled that with his wife. To my knowledge, she's forgiven him, and there was mercy shown, and they've gone through this process. So he has done everything right, but yet he can never step foot in a church again. Right? He can't. Think about it, because every person that he sees is going to be judging him, is going to be lording this knowledge that, he made a mistake. That to me is crazy. Because how many mistakes have I made? How many mistakes have we all made? And we don't hold those, I just don't understand. Why is he so much different than the random guy on the street? And I know the answer. It's because he's this celebrity icon put on a pedestal and is worshipped. Right? He's idolized, and that's wrong, and that's not necessarily the topic of this podcast, because I'd want to do a whole one on idolatry, and now it's bad. But it just angers me again that we can't allow these people to be forgiven. How do we reconcile that? How do we fix that? Like what is the, because we know the Christian response, it's to show them mercy and forgiveness and redemption, but we only let them do the first step.
I was just about to say that. I was about to say we show them forgiveness, but we don't allow them to get to the place of redemption.
Exactly.
Right? It's like, hey, we're going to show you forgiveness. And actually sometimes we never even lay off the place of mercy. I think as Christians, sometimes we continue to put the pressure on and think that person never changed. I remember having a conversation about this with Justin Bieber.
Yeah.
When I was still a fairly new believer, at the time, I think I'd been saved for like 4 years, and I was having a conversation with my roommate about Justin Bieber. And of course, Justin Bieber has made some questionable decisions.
Absolutely.
And my response to this man, like my roommate, was, hey, what if you were in that same position where every part of your life was being criticized and pointed out, constantly being monitored, that whenever you made a small slip up, how would you respond? And I was like, how many of these things are you actually doing? This person smoked, this person drank, this person did this. And I'm like, so, and he's like, well, that's why I'm not in this place. And I'm like, well, do you think like Justin Bieber wants always this attention that he's been given? No, I don't think so. He's even said that.
He said him like lots.
It's like, stop. I just want to live a normal life, but we don't allow him to. Yep. Because now he's this super Christian. This Christian that has to be perfect. But you know what? He's just as imperfect as the rest of us.
Yep.
But yet we still put him on that place, and he's tried to, and he wrote a whole song about it, which is,
absolutely.
I was like, come on, man, why'd you have to put the F word in it? It was a great song, but it was so true and valid, and I think it speaks to our culture. And I use Justin Bieber because I think he's really relevant, and he's in our age group, right?
I think he's actually 25, so it's like,
I think he's like 26, 27.
Okay. Anyway, it's you're so right, and I just don't understand how like we don't. And what hurts me is like our denomination has things in place for people to be like redeemed. Like there is discipline things that you can go through, that if you make a mistake that you can in fact like return to like your position or whatever. Because like one thing that I think some people don't quite understand about the role that you and I have as pastors, that it's not a job, it's a calling.
Yeah.
It is a mantle of responsibility that God tells you to take up, and that I at least hold very dear, and I know that you do, and I think almost all pastors really do. And yes, that comes with extra scrutiny. Absolutely. When you are in charge of people, yes, that 100% comes with extra scrutiny, harder boundaries, and in turn, harder punishment. Yes, 100%, absolutely agree. But you can't stop there. There has to be has to be a redemption arc. There has to be something that allows this person to be redeemed.
Yeah.
And it's sad because we don't have that in the church.
I think the passages we always use in Corinthians is where we always focus on 1 Corinthians. Whereas like they say, cast this man and let him be with the devil.
Yep.
Right? Let him go and like dismiss him from you guys because he's sinning and he's wanting to do so. Dismiss him so that he can come. And so then we focus on that. It was like, oh, this person's sinning. Let's release them to the world because they're heathens. Let them go and fall into their sins and be released to the devil. But then we forget about what happens in 2 Corinthians.
Yeah.
In 2 Corinthians, Paul writes again about this person. He says, he has suffered enough. He has suffered enough. Welcome him back.
Yep.
So somewhere along this line, even Paul is writing a redemption story for this person. We have no idea who this person is in the Corinthians church. Nope. All we know is that this person was messing up, made some bad decisions, so they released him to his sins. And then along the lines, when they did that, they realized this man has suffered enough. Let's walk him back. Let's welcome him back into our community. Yep. And let's walk him through this redemption story.
Exactly. And I mean, I think Luke 15, we got the prodigal son. It's a great example of mercy and forgiveness, but we don't actually get to see the redemption. The story kind of ends there.
And I think that's part of the issue sometimes too. And so if we want to see a redemption story, that is actually in the Bible, because we don't see a ton of it. Yeah. Let's look at the King David.
Yeah. Or Joseph.
King David, Joseph, Moses. Who else can we? Samson.
Well, there's, Paul. Like, there's so many.
Yep.
Like Judas, even Judas technically gets a redemption arc. It's not one that we necessarily talk about a lot. Didn't end necessarily very well.
Yeah.
But he still gets that. He still happens. And so, like, the Bible is full of these things. And so I just look at it and I wonder, why can't we Christians just get our stuff together?
Yeah.
And like, because it is very, very hard. But it comes down to this idolatry. We just start idolizing these people, and that's and that's so wrong. Like, it's like, I love Pastor Mike. He's awesome, but I don't look at him and think of this like celebrity person who is infallible and can't make mistakes, because I know that he can and I know that he will.
Yeah.
But I know that I'm not going to hold that against him, and I do that with everybody.
Yeah.
And so it's just, and I think there are a lot of Christians out there that can forgive, but it just seems that the vast majority of like popular culture Christians can't, or they won't, because it's probably easier. Well, it is. It's just easier to not forgive and to just move on.
Yeah.
It's so tough. And then I look at, so that's a bad example in culture. And then I look at good examples and I'm like, how does Hollywood get it right and the church can't? Right? So one of my favorite redemption stories and its perseverance and so many things is Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man. Okay? This man I did a whole sermon on him in Bible college, so I know this stuff by heart. He was introduced at the age of 8 to drugs from his dad, because it was in like the early 70s where it was like, do this for enlightenment and all these things. It kind of was part of like a religious cult thing, and so like giving his son drugs and just creates this like super bad habit, right? But you ask anybody under the age of 20 today, they have no idea. They just know Robert Downey Jr. is Iron Man.
Yeah.
And so, but they don't know the story, the redemption arc that he took to get there.
Yeah.
And so gets introduced to drugs. The guy was arrested. He went to prison twice. Like, he was driving down the Pacific Coast Highway, like absolutely high out of his mind. He's got a loaded revolver in the seat next to him. It's like, what do you think he's going to do? Like, it's like probably going to take his life. He's probably going to shoot it around. Like, who knows? But it's like a menace and danger to society. Goes to prison, does his time, goes to rehab, gets out, 2005, gets out. Guess what movie came out? 2006, Iron Man came out. Guess who stars in it?
Let me guess. Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, good guess. Jon Favreau, the director of that movie, took a absolute long shot, like out of left field, 0.1% chance on Robert Downey Jr. He had no idea what this guy was going to be like. They were kind of friends before, and he takes this shot on this basically like down and out person.
Yeah.
Shows him mercy, shows him forgiveness, allows him to redeem himself. And in Hollywood is a little bit different, right? Redeeming yourself in culture and all these things is very different, because you don't just redeem yourself to the close people around you, but you have to redeem yourself to the audience. You have to redeem yourself to everybody. And now Robert Downey Jr. is the highest paid actor in Hollywood, has this amazing platform that he uses to promote like mental health, and he donates hundreds of millions of dollars to charity. And he he's not a Christian necessarily, but it's like he's doing everything right.
Yeah.
In terms of like what culture says is right. And so it's, how can the mass I'll say evil presence that is Hollywood forgive this man for harming people and himself and kind of tarnishing the movies that he was in? And then how can just one person just give him this chance? It takes those 3 steps and it completely changes his world. Right? Just like Jesus forgiving Peter.
Yep.
And all these things. And so I look at that and I'm like, man, did we ever get schooled? Like, I look at that and I'm like, man, the church should take some notes, because it's Christians. We need to take some notes on that. You know, like, think of all of these, like we'll go back to Carson Wentz, not the football player, Carl Wentz. He was a great speaker. He was a good pastor despite his mistakes. And you know what? I guarantee you, God is still moving in his life and still has things that he's revealing to him that he can share, but he'll never get the chance to. And maybe I should never say never, but I don't think it's happening anytime soon. And that's really sad, because I guarantee you God is still using that man for something good. and we are denying that now.
No, and I think there's some, he got all the attention, but there's a lot of small end pastors that do the same thing that don't get nearly as, and they could probably have more of a redemption story.
Absolutely.
Because they weren't as well known. I love the fact that you brought up Robert Downey Jr. and actually challenged Christians through that. Because that's exactly it is. Like, man, he was a celebrity. And if not that I'm saying that these people are like, well, actually, really, like Carl Lentz was a celebrity.
He was a celebrity. He would call himself a celebrity.
He was a celebrity amongst Christians.
Yep.
And
no,
so
amongst the world.
yeah,
Like
I guess again amongst the world. Either way, he was a celebrity. And yet, so if we had it in the secular world, right? So in the world, Robert Downey Jr. was a celebrity, and we chose to forgive him, and we redeemed him through that, like that process of becoming Iron Man, and killed it on that as
he redeemed himself as Iron Man.
Yeah, exactly. But then, when we look at that, like you said, what do we do as Christians then to almost recreate that situation? Do we trust? Do we immediately put him back in that place? But the thing, yes or no, right? Because it was drugs. Well, and this guy had an affair. Well, now that's the high end, like top of the line, where it's like, you cannot do that as a leader. And I agree.
Yeah, me too.
But then what does that redemption story look like for a leader who makes a mistake?
Yeah.
Because there is consequences. I mean, even as in the last podcast, like about being a man, it's like you face consequences of your actions. That's one of his consequences. Mm-hmm. But then what does that redemption story look like? Because if we're going to talk about this redemption and forgiveness amongst Christians, well, what does that look like then? How do we apply that in our other everyday lives? Because sure, there's a celebrity, but there's also going to be pastors who are going to do the same thing in your communities that are going to hurt you. They're going to say things. They might mess up because they're human too, just like we said. So how do we then change a culture in the Christian church?
So first of all,
not that it's going to start from this podcast.
No, but it at least gets people thinking about it. And I'll go back to Robert Downey Jr. That first Iron Man movie was not like, we look at Iron Man and we look at all these Marvel movies now and we see them as these multi-billion-dollar industry things. It's like, no, that first Iron Man movie was a complete, utter chance. It was a very low budget film, actually. Like it did not have the same backing. Like Marvel was almost bankrupt.
Yeah.
Actually, they took this huge chance on giving this. It was a B-list movie. Truthfully, it wasn't. He's not like he's gonna go play Charlie Chaplin. That was the last big role that Robert Downey Jr. had.
Yeah.
That was when he had his highest. He was making the most money. He came in at I don't even think he made $1 million on that movie. I don't remember. Which is like pretty low for him, right? Like he started at the bottom and then he had to work his way up again.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously he did a really good job in Hollywood. It's not the best example because it's an exponential growth.
Yeah.
So it's very different. But in the church, we need to give them a chance to serve again.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't like I preached this Sunday. God forbid I go up there and I just completely bomb it, let's say. Like it could happen. I could swear. Who knows? Something terrible could happen. Does that mean that like obviously the first step is I apologize, which Carl's done, his family, the whole church has apologized. So they've hit step one. They've already seen mercy. At least their board and their church, at least in terms of the culture, at least, or key members have shown mercy and they've accepted that. But me, I would say sorry. And then obviously I would get punished. There is obviously punishment that happens. So it's like
him stepping down and
him stepping down. Me probably might get fired. Like there's real things that could happen.
Yeah.
And then maybe I don't get fired. Maybe it's Logan, you can't speak anymore. Sorry, you've lost that privilege. There needs to be a consequence for that action. But then, and I know that this would happen here, then there needs to be a conversation of, well, how do I rebuild from here?
Yeah.
And maybe it starts with, well, people aren't going to see you for a while. Sorry. Like you're going to be able to direct the live stream and that's it. Your boundaries are going to go from being this to this. Super small.
Yeah.
You're only going to be in charge of very little things because you have lost that trust. You have lost that ability. And I think we just need to start trusting them with something small. I guess I say all that to say you trust them with something small. So maybe Carl isn't, maybe he shows up to Hillsong, New York, and he's just a greeter.
Yeah.
right? He probably wouldn't be a greeter because people would see him and turn around. But you know what I mean? It's maybe he just makes the coffee.
Yeah.
Right? We need to give them a chance to actually show that they have changed, that they're not about that anymore, that you can show them mercy and forgiveness and actually allow them to start that process of redemption. And everybody's process of redemption is completely different. There isn't one size fits all. His process is going to be very different than what Robert Downey Jr.'s was or what whoever's is. But we need to give them something. You need to give them something to latch on to. You need to give them a little bit of hope. Yeah.
It's like, I know someone, I'm not going to say their name because someone might know them or not. But in my life that they're an incredible man. I told you the story. You know who I'm talking about. But they made a mistake and they were a pastor at a big church in Manitoba at one point. And he made a mistake and he ended up, same thing as Carl Lentz. He made a mistake and he had an affair. He was meeting with someone and then they ended up crossing, like they got too emotionally attached and eventually there was no boundaries in place that should have been there. And they ended up having an affair. That man and that woman are still together to this day. However, he has never been able to serve in a church really on the same capacity. The only thing he's been able to do now is be a hall monitor. And he helps out with food ministries, like to be able to help hand out food to the homeless.
Yeah.
So other than that, he's not allowed to speak. He's not allowed to volunteer with youth ministries. He's not allowed to volunteer with so many different areas because of his sin.
Yeah.
And that was like almost 20 years ago.
Yeah. And that's the nail in the coffin for me. It was 20 years ago.
Yep. And there's pastors that still talk about it and they see that this man, he's a man of character, a man of God, and he loves the Lord. And they've even said that we don't know someone else that's more in touch with the pain of their sins from the past than this man. So they recognize he is gone. He loves the Lord. He's brought it up. He's gone before the Lord and done these things. However, he is still paying the consequence 20 years later, even though he's reconciled with the Lord. He's tried to deal with things. He tried to go back to his wife, but his wife refused. And so then he's stuck and it's like, well, what do I do? And he has faced, but he will be the first to say, this is the cost of my sin.
Yeah. And
so he's like, that's one where he's like, he's still able to serve in small areas, but sadly he's never, and he speaks into my life all the time.
Yeah.
Incredible man. But sadly he may never, speak in a church again.
And I'm not saying that Carl or whatever, or this person deserves the right to go and be a head pastor somewhere again. That's between God. Like that's ultimately God's decision. But it doesn't mean that it seems like the place that he's at, they're stuck on step 2. Right? They've extended the mercy and they're like, look, you made a mistake. We're here to forgive you. But they stop there. And that's never like, it's got to feel so trapped, I want and we see all these big, pastors and leaders and all these things just completely going off the grid because they get trapped because they can't do anything, and that really hurts me because it's like, and I'm not on the side of the person committing a crime.
Nope,
obviously,
no,
I feel bad for this. And that person probably this person you're talking about. Yeah. I don't think they will ever get the chance to truthfully, I don't think they will ever earn the right to to preach again. I don't think that will happen.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they can't serve in youth ministry. And that just comes down to it's such a contextual church question and things like that. Cause I know that I've had volunteers in my couple of years of ministry who have wronged. They have intentionally maybe made a mistake or they have been late and it's like punishment did need to happen.
Yeah.
And it's not anything bad. It's not like they were doing anything illegal. It's just hey, we've talked about this a couple of times now and nothing's changing. So then I show them mercy and I say look, I forgive you. I understand. Mm-hmm. Here's what you can do to earn your way back.
Yeah.
And we don't do that. We say, you're forgiven. And then you stop them there.
Yep.
And what sucks is you're losing a great kingdom worker now.
Yeah.
And not to say that this person,
no, I mean, he's still doing incredible things. And again, he's pouring into my life. And You even said maybe he's doing more now than he was even before with less pressure.
Exactly. And we don't know, but the idea still remains that we as Christians do need to offer the hand out, like the hand to say like, look, you made a mistake. We're going to pull you up.
Yeah.
Right. Stephen did, one of our pastors, Pastor Stephen did this thing at our ministry training last Monday. You stand on a chair and it's easier to pull somebody down than it is to pull somebody up.
Yeah.
And it's so true. It's so easy for us as Christians to just keep throwing it back in their face.
Yeah.
Because it makes us feel good, ultimately, right? It's the same thing with bullying. We're insecure or we don't know how to handle it, so you just get mad or you throw something back in their face, and it's terrible. But we need to like show them that forgiveness. We need to show them that redemption. And maybe this person is completely happy doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And if they are, then I would say that they have been redeemed.
Yeah.
But if they're not, then I think there needs to be more room to grow.
Yeah.
And that's what's really, really tough.
Yep.
Because this podcast is, normally we end these with a lot of clear cut like application that we could go out and that you can do these couple of things and to do that.
Yeah. I would say the biggest way, if we're ending the way, I would say let's be people who follow that 3-step process.
Yeah.
Let's be people that extend mercy. Let's be people that allow forgiveness, and let's allow people to go on their redemption story.
Yeah.
Right? Show mercy, forgiveness, redemption. I think that's I think that over all of this is like, we need to be people who, one, receive mercy, receive forgiveness, and
receive redemption. Even.
Receive redemption. But then we also need people that extend mercy, extend forgiveness, and allow redemptions.
Yes, absolutely. And people listening, your process is going to be different than mine. You just have to be willing to go through the process.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where we lose a lot of good people along the way. Because, listen, I get so concerned with the idea that like we're just losing so many good kingdom workers. We already don't have enough. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, how are we just letting this one person sin define them for the rest of their life? This will be the last thing we're going to close. There's this famous spoken word artist, Clayton Jennings. You should look up his stuff. It's awesome. And he has this one, it's kind of like rap music, but it's spoken word. He puts them on Spotify, Apple Music, everything. It's awesome. And there's this one that he calls Joe, Joe. And it's this whole story about his friend Joe, who goes through this amazing like redemption arc in terms of like, he was this amazing high school basketball prodigy and gets hurt, can't play. His life is completely ruined. And then he, gets into a promiscuous relationship. And then this girl starts tarnishing his name around town. It's, a small town America type thing.
Yeah.
So now he starts drinking and drugs and he completely goes down that whole path of like he's going to die. And the family, because this Joe and this Clayton guy, the writer of this amazing spoken word, he sees his family and they ask, like, have you talked to him recently? He's like, no, I haven't seen him. And they kind of ask him, they know he's like a pastor. They know he's like this person. Can you reach out and can you help him? He's like, I'll try. So he reaches out, and there's a part in the song where he kind of talks about how he actually saw him at this like restaurant and how he didn't know how to confront him and stuff, because it's like you see somebody that close to you looking like a skeleton kind of thing, or the shell of themselves. And then he finally confronts him a little later, and he goes to their home. He goes to his best friend, right? So you have your best friend. You're welcome in their home anytime kind of thing. Shows up with him, and he's just a skeleton of himself. And he's like dying. Like he's like that addicted to drugs and alcohol that like he's throwing up. Like he could probably die. And he's at his sister's house, and the kid's like, I want my Uncle Joe back, and all these things. They're having this like really intimate moment. And Joe's just like, I want help. He's not a believer at this point. And then Clayton's like, here, I'll help you. So he comes back the next morning and gets him a Bible, and then takes him to like a fashion store, gets him a suit, gets him all cleaned up. I remember the lines of this part so well, and I'm not gonna try to say them in rhythm because I'll just make a fool of myself. But he says like, black on black, talking about the guy's suit and a belt to match, and then you left that store completely changed. You went for fashion because you don't have a passion for it. And he has all these amazing rhymes, and he ends up with he's taking him to his dad, to his family's church. And he gets saved. He learns about the Lord, and he completely changes his life around. And then he starts shouting Jesus over everything. What's his name? Joe, Joe. And he ends the word with how he just talks about like redemption, and he just ends it with saying like, look, you are now redeemed in the eyes of Christ. And I tell that story to remind us all that as we close off this podcast today, that's what we need to be doing for others. It was something so simple. He just brought him to church. He bought him a Bible and some clothes.
Yeah.
But through that, he was able to redeem himself not only to God, but to his family, to the people around him.
Yeah.
And that's what we should be doing. He showed him mercy. He showed him the forgiveness. Right? Because he had wronged his own friend.
Yeah.
But he went through those steps, and he was able to change this person's life around completely. Imagine if we did that.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. That's all I got for this episode.
That's it.
That's it. So, thank you, Bryce, for coming on.
Anytime.
Listeners, make sure you guys, because we are on YouTube now, make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. And if you're listening to us on any podcast platform, specifically Apple and Spotify, leave us a review. I do check them. So if you like it, give us 5 stars. And if you don't, tell us what you don't like so we can get better.
Yeah.
That's how we get better. But if you want to support the show the best way, hit the share button. Truthfully. Pastor Mike and I, we don't care about how many subscribers we have. We really don't. At least, like, I don't. But I do care that more people get to listen and more people get to hear and be empowered and inspired. So if you want to help us, hit the share button. And if you want to get connected with us, you can leave a comment on any of our platforms. But the best way, the most direct way, is just email me, forgiven@bethelbrandon.ca. I say this every time, but I check it every day. And I'm just waiting for that one email that comes in that I get to respond to that really helps somebody. So if that's you, please feel free to reach out. Bryce, you want to end us off with some prayer?
For sure. Jesus, we just thank you that you are someone who extends so much mercy. God, we just thank you that you are someone who relentlessly pursues us and chases us. And God, we just thank you that you love us. So Jesus, I just pray, Lord, as the listeners are going on with their days or whatever they're doing, Father, I just pray that you just be with them. Holy Spirit, that you be their guide. And Father, if there's people out there right now that, Father, feel like they cannot be forgiven, Lord, I just pray that you just press into their hearts and just reveal the truth, that they are already forgiven through your blood. So Jesus, just be with them, leading them and directing them. And Lord, we just thank you for your grace and your forgiveness. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for listening. See you next time.